I call this special meeting of the Village of Villa Park Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Let's start with roll call. Calvert. Here. Hofstra. Jackson. Case.
Here.
Ludke.
Here.
Orlowski. Romano.
Here.
Schlinsky.
Here.
I too am present. With that, we have a quorum. Do we have anyone here this evening wishing to speak on non-agenda items? So wishing to speak on anything other than the application for 27 West Park? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. We have no minutes to approve this evening. So the first item of business will be petition PZ 220005, 27 West Park Avenue, Ardmore Flats, plat of subdivision, variances for Ross Builders Incorporated. The petitioner on behalf of Apex Ardmore LLC, the owner. Before we open the public hearing, I just want to run through the process a little bit. We'll start with staff input. We'll move to presentation of the petitioner. Following that, members of the public who want to have comments or questions, you'll be asked to come up here to the podium, state your name, your address if you wish. Please sign in if you haven't already, and direct your questions to me. I will gather those questions, and then the applicant will have an opportunity to answer those questions in addition to any questions we have. Then we will move to questions from the commission, any closing comments of the petitioner, and then we will discuss up here and have a motion this evening as necessary. We've got a large crowd here this evening, so I want to remind everybody we are being videotaped. That sounds old. We're being recorded for the internet. And we also have a court reporter here tonight recording. So if you're going to speak, I need you to be at a mic. I need people not to speak over each other. When you come up and state your name, please spell your last name for the reporter so she has that. If your first name's especially complicated, you could spell that too. And I'm going to ask that we refrain from cheering, clapping, booing, give everybody their due respect. Last time we had a lot of crosstalk towards the end that was starting to crop up from the audience. It's not fair to the applicant, it's not fair to people up here, and it's not fair to anybody in the audience who's come to hear everything. So we need to keep that to a minimum as well. And with that, I would say anybody who expects to speak this evening, even if you're uncertain, I need you to stand now. We'll get you sworn in, and raise your right hand. This will be quick, we'll get everybody at once. Okay, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give this evening is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. All right, thank you. You can be seated. All right, when you're ready, Ellen.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ellen Weber. I'm the interim community development director for the village, and I'm glad to see all of you here. We like when we have community input. Kevin Mantles is here with me representing Public Works this evening, and he'll help me answer questions for the commission. The reason that we don't have minutes prepared, just so that you're aware, is because this is a special meeting. The commission usually meets on the second. I wondered about that.
Ellen, can I do one small bit of bookkeeping real quick? A motion to reopen the public hearing?
Yes. And I can start
So
over
we
too
need
with
a
the
motion.
microphone.
So moved. Second.
Who made the motion?
Schlinsky made the motion.
Second.
Romano seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We've reopened the public hearing. Thank you.
I'll start over due to the fact we didn't have a microphone, period. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ellen Weber. I'm the interim community development director for the village. I've been in this capacity since February, and I'm glad to see so many people and residents here to represent the community. We like to have your input. That's what a public hearing is all about. Kevin Mantles is also here representing Public Works, and he'll help answer questions regarding the petition. The reason we don't have minutes is the commission usually meets on the second Thursday of the month, and we put this special meeting in place because our docket is very, very full. I've got 11 cases going on right now. A few have been closed, but the caseload is full, so we put this extra meeting in place to try and keep our meetings shorter. So the minutes will be available at the next meeting. If anyone had questions regarding the last hearing, it is online. So I have a short presentation. Kevin, you want to help me, please? All right, the case before us this evening is PZ 22005. It's a proposal for Ardmore Flats at 27 West Park. Kevin, it's not going down. There we go. Okay. It's not on the screen. Sorry, people. There you go. My apologies, we're seeing it on the computer, but not on the screen. Mr. Ross is with us tonight. He's requesting variances in order to build a 4-story, 24-unit market rate apartment building. And these were the variances that were published. We did republish the case a second time because there were 2 additional variances noted at the last meeting that were added. Those are in red here. He's changed the rear to perpendicular parking, and the drive aisle is less than 24 feet. It's at 22, and given the overhang to the south, it does, we feel it's doable, but it does require a variance. Technically, the Community Development Director has the authority within the code to approve this, but I've brought everything before the commission just to be conservative. And then the second variance that was added was the foundation landscaping in the rear, where 0 is provided and 5 foot is required. I'm just going to speak. I don't think I'm going to be able to get it up on the screen here. There's been several opportunities for public notice and input. The case was discussed by the Traffic and Safety Commission informally at their February 1st, 2022 meeting, also at their May 3rd meeting and their June 7th meeting. And then there was an April 14th concept plan presentation provided here to the Planning and Zoning Commission. A community open house was held on June 2nd, and then we moved to a June 9th public hearing. Legal notices were published and letters mailed for that on May 24th, and then the notice was republished on June 14th. When this would go to the village board is still to be determined. This is the current condition, as everyone's aware. It's a rather small building. It's a former bank building turned into a law office. It's 1,491 square feet with 25 parking spaces, and there's just under 1,800 square feet of grass in the northeast corner, which is considered a pervious surface because stormwater can percolate before it goes into the ground. So here is, waiting for it to catch up. When the commission considers cases like this, they're looking at how the prospective development meets the code. So if you look in this right-hand column, these are all the elements that I had to review the case against. When a project comes in, I look at the code and I see what the requirement is. In this instance, it's an MXT zoning district. Then I've got what's proposed for the project, some notes, and then whether or not it met the code or a variance is needed. So the project does meet all of the elements on this page: the minimum build-to frontage, the build-to zone, which is how close the building is to the property line, at the front, at the corner. It meets the side yard, the rear yard, and the building width requirements of the code. It does not meet the impervious lot coverage. It does not meet the garage entrance, but it does meet surface parking, and the driveway access location is not applicable because there's not a surface lot coming off the main street. The height is met in the code. 2 to 5 story is permitted in this district, and he's proposing 4. He has stepped back the 4th floor to comply with the code, and each story meets the height requirements of the code. The commission has discussed the use. It is within permitted uses in the district. The parking's in the building. And the depth of the first floor meets the code. All of these elements meet the code. The transparency, the blank wall, that's blank in the rear, but that's not a primary street. The number of doors, the configuration of the doors, and some of the architectural elements meet the code. This one does not meet the code. This is a requirement in the form-based districts of the code. Form-based zoning means we're looking at the form of the building and how it approaches the street more than we look at the use within the building. And the code requires a 13-foot minimum streetscape. And in this instance, it's always measured from the code. And in this instance, the village has moved the curb back 13 feet to create those parking spaces. So there is a hardship staff felt, and a variance of 4 feet is required. Parking is something that needs a variance. The design of the stalls, this relates to when you come in from the alley, the width of that aisle is not 24, it's at 22. The landscaping I've referenced, the foundation landscaping. Visibility triangle we've identified that as a conflict in the code. We're still working with this brand new code. It was adopted in 2018. And we require the buildings to be close to the lot line, and it's impossible to do a visibility triangle. So there's a conflict there. And then the outdoor lighting, we need to verify a light on the east garage door. If so, it meets all elements of section 9.4. So this is a picture of the building. I'll let Mr. Ross go through the proposal in greater detail. But he's proposed, okay. I didn't realize it was you. So this is what Mr. Ross has proposed. It's 11,239 square foot building, 24 units, 4 stories, 46 feet tall, 11 one-bedroom units and 13 two-bedroom. There's a total of 24 units with 37 bedrooms, which would require 37 parking spaces. And before us tonight are requests for variations, and the intent of a variation is to grant relief from strict compliance with the regulations of the zoning code. The intent is not to simply remove an inconvenience or financial burden, but it's intended to help alleviate a practical difficulty or hardship that would be caused by the literal enforcement of the ordinance. And it's intended to provide site-specific relief when the requirements of the zoning render land difficult or impossible to use because of a unique or special characteristic to the property itself. This is the zoning. You can see to the south, you've got the apartment buildings and MX2 to the east, MXT to the north across the path. And then when we get to this part, I've got the motions to put them up on the board for the convenience of our residents to see. But for right now, I'm going to let Mr. Ross give his presentation.
I'm Craig Ross with Ross Builders. Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, commissioners. Thanks, community, for coming out. I'm going to go over the changes that we made since our last meeting, so I'll keep it fairly brief. The first thing we did was set back the fourth floor on the west elevation by 9.5 feet. This did two things. I mean, one, eliminated one of the bedrooms, and two, makes that side a little bit softer, makes it, you know, I think Commissioner Ludke had this recommendation, just makes it a little bit softer on that west side. The second thing we did was revise the exterior alley parking. We changed it to perpendicular. This was the staff recommendation and a bunch of the departments. By doing this, we were able to add a stall, so that increased the parking in the alley from 10 to 11. It also increased the buffer between the alley and the rear of the parking stalls. It used to be 4, now it's 6.82. And it also allowed us to widen the parking stalls from 9 feet to 9.5 feet. This is the fourth floor. This is really the only floor plan that changed. In the lower left-hand corner, behind the stairwell, you can see that there's no longer building there. That's a rooftop terrace, and that unit in the lower left was changed from a 2-bedroom to 1-bedroom to make it smaller, and again, to push that back 9.5 feet. This is the front elevation. Nothing you could really tell from here that's changed. This is the west elevation. So I have a 3D coming up later. It'll be more apparent, but on this 2D, you can see that the brown area, that's that stairwell. And if you look to the right of that, that light gray area above that used to be all flush, used to be 4 stories, but now the darker gray behind it is set back to 9.5 feet. East elevation hasn't changed. This is the south elevation. So again, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, again, this is a 2D. The stairwell would be where the cloud is, so to speak, but it'd be 30 feet back. So we didn't show that stairwell, just so you can get an idea. If you were standing in the alley, it would look more like this, or even if you're standing farther back. This is the front corner. Again, nothing you could really tell changed too much from there. This is the previous. So again, we're going to focus in on the brown area where the stairwell is, and then look to the right of that. As I go to the next page, you'll see how that has now been set back. So when you go to the fourth floor, it's not all flush with the first, second, and third floor. It's set back that 9.5 feet. I'll go back so you can see the previous, and here's the proposed, the new proposed. Now on the site plan, again, the major change here is going to be the parking in the rear. You'll notice now it's perpendicular to the building. You'll also notice we have 11 spaces instead of 10 spaces. It also helped with some of the impervious. We now have less impervious. Those were the major changes on that, really the only changes. Well, actually, the one minor change in the upper left-hand corner, staff let us know that we do need an ADA parking space due to the number of spaces now in that area in front of us. So that island got a little bit smaller to accommodate the ADA space. So these are the changes on the variance requests. Ellen went over most of this, but I just want to go over them more specifically since our last meeting. Again, we're still looking for a variance on the impervious, but now our request, right now we're at about 85% versus before when we were in here, it was about 87%. Again, most of this came from the revision of the alley. So in that corner where the ADA parking spot is, we were able to pick up some more green space. The parking variance request used to be 6, now it's been reduced down to 4. Again, we did that by 2 things. 1, being able to add that parking stall in the rear, and then 2, eliminating one of the bedrooms and one of the units on the 4th floor when we set it back on that west side. The new variance that we have that Ellen had mentioned, now that we went perpendicular in the back, is the drive aisle. So the code would require 24 feet to turn into a perpendicular parking space. We have about 22 feet. But we did this because it seemed to be supported by Public Works. They like the 2-way traffic. They like that you'd be able to go either way. They like that it's going to disperse traffic. And it was recommended by staff to go this route, so we certainly did that. It's also supported by KLOA, who did a revised traffic assessment, which we have submitted. And as Ellen mentioned, there is a section in the code that states the community development director is authorized to establish dimensions for parking configurations not shown. And as I had mentioned, the configuration that we now have isn't something shown. We have 9.5-foot wide stalls. Obviously, the wider you go with stalls, the less turning radius you need to be able to get into it. So we've widened them. To kind of give you an example, the city of Chicago in their code actually has 8-foot wide stalls are only required, and you only need a 22-foot drive aisle, and they even allow you to go down to 20-foot wide turn if you have stalls that are 8.5 feet. So we're well above those. We're, again, at about 22 feet and 9.5 feet wide. And that's it. Those are all the changes that we made.
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. All right, so at this point in the hearing, we would take additional public participation and questions. I know some of you probably were not here at the previous meeting, but to the degree possible, if you were here in the past and spoke, try to keep comments to the changes. We were also got a 3-minute time limit. We're going to be pretty strict with that. Give you a little bit of overrun, but not much, because we have a lot of people here to speak, even more than last time when we got out here about 11:30 last time. So I guess whoever wants to go first, please come up here, state your name, address if you would, and spell your last name as well.
Donna Noxon, N-O-X-O-N, Grand Road, Villa Park. First of all, I want to thank all you guys for the work you do. Sometimes I feel like you're underappreciated. I appreciate you, and I believe the village does too. Same goes for staff. To start my speech, this is towards Mr. Ross. As stated in the Ross presentation in tonight's agenda packet, page 8, it states no one wants the appropriate amount of parking spaces more than us. We do not have a viable project if we do not offer enough parking. And it says, based on our research and experience, this proposal allows for enough parking. I took it upon myself to visit 2 rental properties of Ross Builders that I was aware of. The one on Fairview and the one on 204 and 210 Wheaton Avenue. Fairview is currently under construction, and the Wheaton project is still an empty lot 14 months later. So eliminating the research part of the statement, including the yard matrix, the KOL, etc., what are you basing your experience aspect on? What physical, already built, real-world existing rental properties are you basing your experience on? Can you give the village a list of those physical, already built, real-world existing rental properties? As a side note, when I stated based on our research and experience, this proposal allows for enough parking, I want to reiterate that the research and experience is parking specific and not what other villages have allowed. Perhaps residents would be able to digest this more if they could physically see something already physically existing to reference. I want to state that I have no horse in this race. I'm very much pro-development, but I don't want parking problems to nag us now and in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Paul Buchema. I'm with Buchema, B as in boy, U as in uncle, I-K-E-M-A. I can give you a card. With Buchema Law Group, and we are here this evening on behalf of Noel Crest Funeral Home and Starley Chapel. And I just wanted to thank you as well for allowing us to be here tonight and for your time. And I wanted to emphasize Interim Director Weber's comment regarding the village code and that variations must stem from unique or special characteristics of the property itself. They're not solely for monetary reasons. In this case, the property is flat and not oddly shaped, and monetary reasons are the only basis for the parking reduction, the alley narrowing, impervious surface issues, as well as others. Many of these things could be met if the project was smaller in size. The principal issue that Knoll Crest had, one of the principal issues is the parking situation. The parking calculations do not include the potential use of dens in some units as additional bedrooms. And any post-approval modifications to a project, if it were approved, should make sure that that was strictly prohibited. The approval will require Knoll Crest to block off its parking in the area to make sure that there is enough parking for its customers when they arrive for funerals. And finally, the traffic report was performed by a very reputable company, but it didn't analyze the alley's use by other businesses or look at the overall parking demand for the area, and therefore would be insufficient. Just today, I know there were a number of trucks parked in the alley at any given time. So just to reiterate, the petitioner's responses to the variation standards were inadequate, as there is no hardship other than not being able to have more units. A reasonable return of the property can be obtained. There are no unique site conditions that are relative to the variances requested here, especially the modified ones this evening. And the character of the area, health and safety will be impacted by a project of this size that will shrink or certainly reduce parking in the area, and an underparked area will only become more of an issue going forward. Consequently, we request that the Plan Commission not approve this variance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Brian Murphy, M-U-R-P-H-Y, 436 South Princeton Avenue. Good evening, everyone. In regards to the requested changes on the proposed development, I don't feel they go far enough. I don't speak for everyone in the community here, but I can say that we're not all here squabbling about just a couple parking spaces and one bedroom less. Commissioner Ludke, I believe that you had said last time that there's obviously a bulk issue at play here, fundamental as well as parking. And Chairman Jarrett, you did say that the site is tight, but it really doesn't have to be. The bulk issues can go away pretty easily with the right decisions being made, the right size development, and the codes upheld. I do appreciate the southwest corner being, that it does look better, what's proposed tonight. But on paper, we're still looking at 24 units and 37 bedrooms. And I think from the last meeting, the conversation about that, you know, we're really talking about 48 bedrooms still in the property. So you have an 8x10 enclosed den with 2 bathrooms and a 1,000 square foot apartment. So I think the price point and the layout of a 1-bedroom apartment screams roommates. And you know it's going to be presented to prospective renters that way. I know this has been asked and only answered as if it's a rhetorical question, but if the building is reduced to 12 to 14 units, can we accommodate indoor parking and make the project code compliant? The only answer we've gotten from Mr. Ross is that he can build a 5-story single bedroom complex. But you know, he did also say that these units would be condo ready, and Commissioner Calvert, in your memo, you mentioned that lack of parking is the curse of any residential building and will ultimately become an undesirable property without adequate indoor parking. And you suggested the village request the units be condo ready with appropriate parking. I'm wondering if that can be addressed. The truth is, right-sized development that meets all codes without any variances can be built on this site without any legitimate hardship to Mr. Ross. We all know this. I have nothing against Mr. Ross personally or developing this property in general. This is just what he prefers to build, and he has to try to maximize his investment. But the village should not feel obligated to push this through as it stands. The staff memo from June and today states that the petitioner has not sufficiently demonstrated that the variances requested, are due to hardship conditions of the property. I do appreciate all of your work, Ellen, the staff. It's not lost on me that you all live here. Many of you live very close to this, deal with a lot of the issues that we're talking tonight as far as flooding and the parking and everything. So, I appreciate that. I believe that you do care and that you want progress in the village and that you're listening to our concerns. So I think we should strive to do what is right in a timely manner, but not in haste.
Okay.
So residents will live with the results of these decisions for decades. I ask that you find that no hardships exist for the applicant if he follows the codes, and that you deny the variances.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
How's it going, guys? Thanks for being here. Thanks for letting us all be here. My name is Ted Ott. O-T-T is the last name. I live at 39 West Park Boulevard. That's literally 2 houses away from where this building is going to be built. When I moved in 2003, I wasn't told that there's a flooding issue around my house. Literally, my house sits in the middle of a flooding issue. All the houses on the Princeton side of my house, the backyards have flooded out since I moved in. My house and the house just to my west, the front yard floods out. And I'm not talking just a little bit of wet in the grass. I'm talking 2, 3, 4 inches of water in my front yard, and at least that much in my backyard. When I moved in, I had flooding issues. My neighbor at 37 West Park Boulevard, she had flooding issues. Her neighbors, at least 3 to her south, had flooding issues. It was so bad, she decided to get in contact with the village to have a storm drain put in her backyard. To help alleviate her cost on that, I chipped in. I'm not sure how much it was. This was years and years ago, but it was thousands of dollars. The village chipped in and paid half. I felt no relief from this. No relief at all. My house still floods. I had a flooded basement. I mean, has planning and zoning really taken this into consideration? You're putting a 24-unit building 2 houses from me. That's going to cause even more problems with the stormwater. Not to mention the snow plowing. Where's all that going to melt off? And I noticed the other day during Summerfest, you guys used the parking lot there to put up porta-johns. And you use the parking lot just to have fun there in the village. Now, I'm not against development. I want to see a building there. It's fine. But I want it to fit the neighborhood. I want it to look like it should fit the neighborhood. And I want it to not affect me with stormwater. So please, do your due diligence and figure out the flooding issue in my neighborhood and my neighbors' homes before you decide to put 24 more units there. Because it's gonna get worse. That's all that happens. It always gets worse. It doesn't get better until the problem's fixed before you put in a new building. So please, please, you guys, do your due diligence and look into this for me. I don't care if you got to survey my yard for a week. Please figure this out for me. I put in a willow tree just to soak up some of the water there. And now I'm getting in trouble by ComEd and the cable companies because it's so long that the branches reach up to the wires. I got problems, guys. You guys, please, do your due diligence. All my neighbors that live right there around me, they're asking you too. They wanted me to speak tonight because it's a serious issue. Every time it rains for more than a day, I got to think about flooding. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Alicia Bailey, A-L-E-S-I-A, Bailey, B-A-I-L-E-Y, 419 South Princeton. So in order to receive a variance, the petitioner must prove hardship, as far as I understand, correct? What is the hardship the petitioner is claiming prevents him from complying with our code, which clearly states 70% max impervious surface, and yet he needs 84.99%? it's still over our allowed code. Where is the proof of his hardship? Why is this code in place? Is it to help alleviate the flooding? It's a well-known hardship here. We lived through it numerous times. I've lived through it for 20 years. This is the hardship I lived through with. 2020, all the way 2013, if I can still go back to 2022. I've been working with Public Works for 20 years. I have to drag pumps out because I still have no resolution to my issue. So I have to pump it, because if I have that much standing water for weeks, it's a breeding ground for mosquitoes, who are the leading cause of Lyme disease. So my hardship is the cost of pumps, electricity, yard damage, replacing mulch, flowers, bushes, and I reluctantly deal with these hardships because I love my home and my neighborhood. But if eventually I do get the drainage assistance program, because they've engineered this numerous times over numerous years, somehow it keeps getting pushed off, and every year it's pushed off, it costs me more and more and more. So my last quote, it's going to cost me nearly $10,000 to do this drainage project. And that is also $10,000 to my neighbor behind me. So this is a $40,000 project because they flood just as badly behind me on Ardmore. So why is there no green roof or permeable pavers that was suggested by the village staff? As a homeowner and residents yourselves, you volunteer to represent us and to represent your neighbors. And I urge you to vote no on the variance of allowing the 84.99% coverage, because we are going to have flooding. He needs to abide by the codes. Stick to the rules, stick to the codes. That's what I believe should be done here. And I'm going to leave these photos for you. But in case nobody else has seen them, this is May 2020. 2019. 2017. June 2015. June 2013. I could go back to 2007, but do I really have that much time? I've only got 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'll make sure those get into the public record.
Hi, I'm Molly Kars. It's with a K, K-A-R-C-Z. I live on Princeton in Villa Park. I've been there for over 25 years. I was out of town for the last meeting, so what I heard from that meeting was that at the end of the meeting, you guys asked the developers to go back and kind of revisit their plan and kind of honor the concerns of the people of Villa Park, some of the zoning. So when I looked at the changes that they were just showing us, it looks like they did not put a good faith effort into doing that, because my biggest concern is the 85% lot coverage that they're asking for. Zoning requires 70%. They originally were at 90%, but then you earlier said it was 86%. So I'm a little confused on that number. But so they went down to 85%. So they only went down 5 or less percent. I'm unsure on that number, or 2%. So I just want to look at the numbers. I know it sounds really easy, but so the zoning says 70% lot coverage, 30% open space, right? And we all have seen this number. And he's requesting 85% lot coverage and 15% open space. So that means we're 50% less open space on this development. So we're losing 50% of the open space. Clearly the village has a plan for new development, and it takes into account zoning, trying to maintain the village, garden village feel, right? Well, the zoning was put in place, I'm sure, to follow that plan and to support the plan. So what I'm saying is, if you have a developer that is not showing much interest or concern in following the zoning or following the concerns of the people, then we need to vote no, because they don't share the vision that you all have for Villa Park and that we all have for Villa Park. So I'm really urging you to vote no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Christine Fogarty, Fogarty, 37 West Park. My questions actually relate to the 11 parking places that are on the south side of the proposed building. The current sidewalk layout, I believe, is requiring the tenants to walk behind the parked cars, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? Is it up against the building now? Where's the walkway for the people who are parking there?
It is at the, between the end of the parking stalls and the, it's like, can't see the dimension in front of me, but it's at the south end of the
So it's
stalls.
behind the parked cars, between there and the alley? Okay, is there any way that a walkway could be put alongside the building for the safety of the tenants?
We could talk about that more, not on your time, with the applicant,
Okay.
when we get to questions. and
Okay, I wasn't
discussion.
sure if
But
there was
I'll
some reason
write
why
that
it was
down.
placed there. Thank
Yep.
you. And then my other thought is in the winter, when it's time for the building manager to clear the snow from the back lot, where will the tenants who are parked there move their vehicles so that the snow can be cleared? And who is going to coordinate that effort between the tenants and the snow removal contractor? My concern is that as soon as the village comes through and plows the alley, everyone's going to park there while they wait for their spaces to be cleared, which obviously is a hazard, so we can't have that. I feel a smaller development would eliminate a lot of concerns that my neighbors have voiced. And we should probably try not to fit a square peg into a round hole, because it's just never going to work. So I ask that you vote no to these variances.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and questions.
Hi, Ian, I-A-N, McLeod, M-A-C-L-E-O-D. L-E-O-D. Thanks, everybody. My address is 417 South Princeton. I get flooded because of her. But my kids get to skate in her backyard.
Yes.
We moved from 744 South Ardmore, just the first Cape Cod in from Madison. And we moved away from there because for me, I couldn't get into work in the morning, just backing out of your driveway was impossible because nobody would let you in. Traffic's backed up there on Ardmore. But we were growing our family. We had an 8 or 9-year-old when we moved to 417 South Princeton. She's now 21. We've got a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old. And it's a safety thing for me. It's congested as it is. We've known several kids who have been hit by cars. Eleanor Richardson, when she was 12, she's now 21, has always had problems, had her jaw. This is crossing the prairie path on Ardmore. So when I picture this building being built, when my daughter was, in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, she could walk to Ardmore. My son, who's now at Jackson, could walk home to and from Ardmore. My 9-year-old is not going to have that opportunity because I won't allow it. Just passing that new blind spot, and my question is, what with the new blind spot on the southwest corner, and what's the commission and the village going to do to, guarantee safety, because it's already bad just with that alley. And then exiting the alley onto Ardmore is pretty much common knowledge that anybody who uses it, it's a blind spot where Bob's or Joe's barber shop used to be when you're taking a right onto Ardmore, heading east. Last Friday, it's funny because Anne Marie texted me this message with the beer trucks lined up. This is Friday morning at 10 a.m. I had just sent her the stop sign on the same corner that was just knocked over by a car, broken. So it's already congested. It's hard to take a turn off a park onto Ardmore, whether you're going north or south. The kids are coming around. We've had conversations with my neighbors. I've been down the street. There's about 46 kids between Madison and Park Avenue on Princeton Avenue, under 16 years of age. And we have several new young babies in the community as well. They're going to grow up and they're going to, experience those dangers. So my question is, just on both those exits, what can be done to guarantee safety? I mean, we're not going to put traffic lights on, Highland and Ardmore, but we almost need traffic lights on Park and Ardmore. I mean, it's bad as it is, and with all these new influx of people moving in, those are my questions. Hope I was clear enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Kim Ormond, O-R-M-O-N-D, and O-N-D, and I'm the owner of 26 West Highland, which is directly behind the proposed development. Directly behind? The proposed development. So I was dismayed to see the developer crammed another parking space into the alley rather than reducing the units.
Excuse me, I'm gonna
Okay.
Can you get closer to the left, Kim, please?
Yeah. Okay, I was dismayed to see the developer crammed another parking space into the alley rather than reducing the units in this oversized building. I would point out that my own building, constructed in 1960, still meets the current code of 6 parking spaces, 1 per bedroom. The building will tower over my property and other nearby residences, and the sheer number of units is more than the area can handle. The alley to the south is already crowded with deliveries and local traffic. More cars will result in more accidents, especially at the blind exit that leads onto Ardmore. Our streets will be overcrowded. There aren't enough spots for residents. What about guests? What about sleepover guests given the overnight parking ban? What happens during holidays when relatives visit and stay for days? When late night guests arrive or leave, will they cut across my property to retrieve vehicles parked in Highland passing by my residents' bedroom windows? The building is supposed to attract cyclists whose primary...
Excuse me, if you could just stay down.
Okay, sorry. I'm just trying to make sure I make the time limit. The building is supposed to attract cyclists.
Building what?
The building is supposed to attract cyclists
Is supposed to attract cyclists.
Thank you.
whose primary mode of transportation are bikes. No one is pedaling their way to Jewel in the middle of February. Instead, the streets will be flooded with even more traffic from delivery drivers and Ubers. The pricing of these apartments is out of line with rents in the immediate neighborhood. The other high-rent developments offer amenities such as swimming pools, adequate parking, including guest spaces, and large courtyards. The proposed development offers none of these. If you could afford to spend this kind of money on rent, would you choose a building with inadequate parking and minimal amenities? There are already more than 500 luxury units in the works in Villa Park. This leaves overpriced apartments to be occupied by the target demographic of cyclists, young professionals, and empty nesters. I don't know many cyclists willing to pay outrageous rents for access to a public area when cheaper apartments are minutes from the Prairie Path. Even in the best of times, young professionals would struggle to pay these rents. With today's inflation, young college grads will not find these units within their price range. The one-bedroom apartments will have 2 bathrooms and a den. How many one-bedroom apartments have you seen with 2 bathrooms? Even Ovaltine Court only offers 1 bathroom with their 1 bedrooms. Use common sense. Many of these dens will undoubtedly be used as a 2nd bedroom to cram in roommates to divvy up the rent. We weren't born yesterday. We know what's going to happen. This will result in even more occupants, more cars, more traffic, and more crime. There's a lack of affordable housing in the area, and this only adds to the problem. How is the average working-class citizen supposed to afford these units? Snow removal is already an issue in the alley. There's barely enough room for the existing buildings to pile up snow after a heavy storm. With such a large footprint, where will this building put its heaps of snow? The alley is often not plowed for days or weeks in the winter. More traffic in these conditions will result in more accidents. Approving a variance to allow more impervious surfaces on the development's property will increase the burden on the city's sewer system. In addition to that, you'll have lots more toilets flushing, washing machines going, et cetera, et cetera. Who is going to pay for me when my building is damaged by sewer backups? With so many negative features, neighboring property values will decrease. When owners are underwater, will the developer pay for the economic harm and make us whole? The developer simply did not buy enough land for their ambitious project. The neighborhood should not be negatively impacted so they can rake in the cash. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You won't have any problem hearing me. People that are hard of hearing speak loud and slow. No. My name is David Green, Green, no E, 516 South Princeton. The developer's Downers Grove project with a .61 acre site has only 18 units, and the Villa Park proposal with only a .4 acre site, which is 2/3 the size, has 24 units, 1/3 more. This is like an experiment in planting a skyscraper on a postage stamp. The Downers Grove site is also right next door to the Metro parking lot, where presumably people could rent additional parking spaces. The Villa Park site has no other parking options. Whether a building proposal is an original design or a revision with requested modifications, it is still just on paper. In the complex product manufacturing world, there's a common practice called product validation, where a prototype is built and proven for success in the real world. In the apartment building world, we can only look for representative examples that have been successful. The developer has not yet completed any apartment buildings and demonstrated success in regard to parking space, traffic flow and safety, and other functional objectives. My question is, where can we find an example of an operational apartment building next to a residential area with similar design specifications and vehicle capacity that has been successful in pleasing its tenants and neighbors? The Village of Villa Park and the nearby neighbors don't want to be the guinea pigs for an unproven experiment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Burns, the 300 South Block of Illinois. No, B-U-R-N-S. All right, no problem. So thank you so much for your willingness to volunteer on this commission. I know it's can be challenging, but also very rewarding, so thank you so much. I know that Villa Park, we're trying to do a little bit better job of kind of planning for our future and things like that. We're also really good at sometimes being able to think outside the box and really kind of troubleshoot some interesting issues. I just am not sure if this version of the plan really is the best version that could maybe fit on that piece of property. I really want to make sure that this property, because it's going to be a newer building and a lot of the other structures there are older, I want to make sure this building is something that really can help anchor that area if future redevelopment happens to occur. I don't know who owns the sunlight, but I am concerned with the height of this building. For those of us that are starting to think about doing more solar projects, I'm not quite sure what the immediate businesses around it and what some of the homes on Princeton. Again, I'm not an expert, but it's just solar. I know there's that meeting at Iowa Community Center. I know it's on a Wednesday night. I've got swim meets, can't go. I don't know if it was last night or if it's July 6th, it's something that's coming up, but that's being advertised. I just really don't want to take away future opportunities for more green energy away from our residents and businesses, because maybe there's a better way to do this project. Please, I know about the flooding in the area. You cannot allow less permeable surface. I really would like it to help alleviate, not keep it equal or make it worse. And also, as I'm heading into the second half of my life, mobility and scooters, wheelchairs, type of vehicles that can help me still be an independent adult. I am really nervous about things becoming narrower, and if we do have individuals that do need extra supports and services, I just want to make sure that they can live there and have access to all of the amenities that Villa Park has to offer, and not feel that it's not good enough, because I know it can be good enough. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Sorry. My name is Sue Mucerino. I live at 427 South Yale, last name spelled Mucerino. Thank you, gentlemen, for allowing me to speak. I am here to clearly request the commission vote no and reject this particular development. Although we are pro-development, this is the wrong development, which will result negatively impacting the health, safety, and welfare of our village. It is also completely out of character for this MXT zoned block and the adjacent residential blocks. And we know this to be the wrong development based upon a number of truths and facts. When you met earlier in June, and also traffic and safety, nobody could vote on this because if it was a vote, it would have been a no vote. Planning and zoning allowed the petitioner to come back, try it again, and again, he has not met code compliance with the codes. And if he had followed the normal practices of land purchase, none of us would have to be sitting here tonight contesting this. He would have had contingencies in the sale, and he would have gotten approval from the village and governing bodies prior to finalizing the sale of the property. Mr. Ross took a financial risk. This is his hardship, not the village's or the village residents. Again, the village has no obligation to the petitioner. However, you have an obligation to all of us in this room because we are residents who pay for the village through our taxes to operate properly, including upholding codes, which means to protect the village. So as members of P&Z, you just need to wait till the right development comes. It will come. Now, I did a little research on my own, and although I'm not a lawyer, I do understand how the law works. And according to Intro to Variances 2, finding of substantial hardship. Say again, Intro to Variances 2, finding of substantial hardship by the law offices of Phillips and Angley. In order to grant a hardship variance, it must be relating to soil conditions, shape, or topography. None of these exist with the petitioner's request for parking and lot coverage variances. Intro to Variances points out 6 court cases against petitioners that a financial hardship alone on the part of the petitioner does not constitute a reason for variance. Therefore, I believe legally, in accordance with following village code, we can't vote yes for the parking and lot coverage variances. Hardship has not been met. In fact, community development in today's memo points out, stating, and I quote, "The development shall comply with all applicable village codes and regulations." They also state, and I quote, "Hardship has not been proven for parking requirements and lot coverage." Furthermore, village staff goes on and provides a solution to the variance requests in order to make the project comply with code, stating, and I quote, "Parking requirements could be met through a variety of changes, which would include shrinking the building footprint." This site is not unusually shaped. It's basically a rectangular, a little bit of a modified parallelogram, so a number of developments could easily fit into this space. The footprint simply needs to be smaller, and by eliminating the 4th floor, it would match the character of this particular area of Villa Park. So please just vote no, and I do have 2 questions. And a final statement. We're looking at the details. We're getting in the weeds here. We need to look at big picture and long term. We're looking short term. We're looking at the proposal. We need to look at long term of the project. We know current apartment complexes that had complied with code when they were built. We have parking issues. In my packet, and I hope people read it, maybe they didn't, but I have photos of overflow parking on a nightly basis. This is not an issue with the police, it's because things change over time. And I also did an analysis, and I called York Assessors Township, and I don't know if you saw this, and I did it specifically for the apartments. Yeah, I'm almost done. Almost done.
I know you had 2 questions, but
they require 1.42 parking spaces per bedroom. Villa Park is different. It's not like what General statistics show we are a commuting village. So my two questions, and thank you for letting me talk, is one to the petitioner. What are your reasons for not following the suggestions made by village staff to reduce building footprint and eliminate the need for variances? And then my question to P&Z is, has consideration been given to the legal ramifications for granting variances if they don't meet hardship qualifications? Thank you, and I do appreciate you volunteering. I know it's a hard job up there, and I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Hello. Steve Seddon, Seddon, from South Princeton, and I am reading on behalf of Michael Zucker, Zucker, also of South Princeton. It was asked by a concerned resident at the June 9th Planning and Zoning meeting if the developer could build a smaller building that would fall within the code as written. The developer responded that he could build a 5-story building comprised of 1-bedroom apartments. Commissioner Schlensky, in relationship to the parking and impervious surface variation request, how do you reconcile the developer's admission that it is possible to develop a residential building here against Village Code 11.5.1 variations intent? This code states that the intent of a variation is not to simply remove an inconvenience or financial burden that may result from compliance with applicable zoning requirements. Village staff agrees that a hardship has not been proven for each variance request. Per the June 30th village staff memo, parking requirements could be met through a variety of changes, which could include shrinking the building footprint, reducing bedroom count, or including commercial uses. Lot coverage could be met through a variety of changes, which could include shrinking the building or increased use of permeable surface. Staff had discussed increasing permeable surface in the rear area adjacent to the alley with concrete adjacent to the alley to avoid damage from snowplows. Rear landscape requirements could be met by shrinking the building. This development has no community support and lukewarm staff support. Mr. Chairman, you agreed with Commissioner Calvert that this is one of those situations that you don't have a plan for. The Park Ardmore area is ripe for redevelopment, not opposed to it. No cohesive plan in terms of how they want to go about it. You need to develop a plan for this district before you set a dangerous precedent that you are willing to just build anything under the cover of development. The community is not opposed to development in this area. We are opposed to this development. This board is established to represent Villa Park and the residents that reside here, not outside developers. You are under no obligation to approve these variances based on Ross Developers' time input. Ross Developers' goal is to make money. Do not be fooled with his disingenuous concern for the residents of our town. At the prior planning and zoning meeting, the board requested that Mr. Ross come back to today's meeting with a variance request of 3 parking spaces, bring the west wall in, and find ways to create more impervious surface. Mr. Ross has failed on all 3 requests. Vote no on these variances requested today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anne Marie Testa, T-E-S-T-A. And tonight I want to present the commission with an updated petition list asking the village to reconsider allowing a building this big. We had 256 petitions submitted last time between online and paper. This time we're up to 422.
Thank you. I'll make sure that goes into the record.
Thank you. So I have a present for you. The part of Sue's comment at the end when you gave her all that extra time was actually going to be part of my comment. So my comment will be shorter. I just want to bring up one thing about parking. The petitioner has stated that his parking will be self-regulated. I find this a little confusing, but we do now know that he's only decreased his requested variance on parking from 6 to 4 spaces. So we still have a variance of 4. I honestly don't really even understand it all. It's not just a little confusing. I don't understand self-regulated parking at all. So, but we do know, in addition to the 4 spaces, we know that the congestion witnessed all over at current apartment buildings in Villa Park, parking in general, is not inherently self-regulating. You have to start with enough. People's situations change, teenagers start driving, boyfriend, girlfriend moves in. In the city, the big moving months are May and October. Those are the best months to drive through the alleys and see what good things people left behind or couldn't take with them. This is also known as garbage picking. But you can move in and out any month you want. I mean, it's some seriously good garbage picking sometimes. I assume you can also start and end parking space rental in the proposed development in any month. But I ask you to keep in mind, this proposed building will start out with an inventory of 33 spaces, which are all equal in the sense they're all available for rent. However, these 33 spaces aren't all the same in the sense that they're available to all the same demographic. 2 of them are ADA compliant spaces for use by cars that have either state-issued permanent disability placards or disability license plates. In 2017, Illinois had issued 678,000 placards and disability plates combined. That same year, there were 4.6 plus change license plates issued to cars alone. This is just cars. Over 5 million truck plates were also issued that year, but I don't know how to separate out the kind that are owned by your neighbors and my neighbors versus the bigger ones. So we won't count those. And keep in mind, even a small truck like a Ford Ranger needs a B truck plate. 31 is actually the inventory of spaces that will be available to the demographic non-disability designation holders. I mean, the developer won't rent spaces that are reserved for the disability to non-qualifying tenants, will he? And then this is kind of the part about Sue. I was going to show the photos of the congestion, people parking in church lots, business lots, and even on the streets, overnight parking where it's not supposed to be, you know, it's illegal. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Tony Mucerino, M-U-C-E-R-I-N-O. I live at 427 South Yale. And I'd like to start my comments by just an observation about the process. I think that we have focused so much on how many square feet, pavers, how long a parking space will be, 15.5 versus 16 feet. We need to draw back a little bit and recognize how many contortions that we have to go through to make this work. I know a wise real estate agent works for Collier's International, and he has what he calls a machination meter. A machination is an extra set of extra contortions and rationalizations that have to be gone through to make something work. And this project has so many of them. The parking spaces right now have no stops for the vehicles. They're going to stop at the curb, which is allowed in writing, but 2.5 feet between the curb that they would come to rest at and the building would mean some vehicles that have more than 2.5 foot in length are going to hit the building by the time people get to a stop point with their tires. The walk space, someone asked, why can't we move that to the building, the 4 feet that's proposed behind the cars? The reason is because if that were put there, Buick Elantra or a Buick, trying to think of the name of the model, there's a Buick SUV at 17 feet long, just a common size minivans, a Tesla X, not that someone there maybe would drive that, but they're almost 8 feet wide. vehicles are getting bigger. Ford stopped making small vehicles and has gone to SUVs as an example. The reason that you can't put that 4 feet in the front next to the building where it would be safer for the tenants is because you don't really have that much space and you don't have the 4 feet behind it. By putting the peninsula on the corner of Park and Princeton, if you were to, on your diagram, set a vehicle at the stop bar and pretend you're in the driver's seat and look to the northeast where traffic would be coming, you now have a new visibility triangle problem. The same is true now that we've talked about making these spots perpendicular in the back of the building to the south, and traffic could be heading in either direction. Traffic that's headed now towards Princeton will have a visibility triangle problem as they approach Princeton. We still have issues of snow removal, how people are going to park their vehicles when their spaces need to be plowed at the rear of the building. Pavers have been suggested as a wonderful way to address some of the permeability issues. Any site that you look at and ask the question, what are problems with pavers? They're usually related to the soil beneath them not being compacted well enough. If you compact the soil well enough so the pavers can withstand traffic or heaving and thaw cycles, you eliminate a lot of the drainage and the permeability benefit that they're supposed to provide. This is another example of a Band-Aid or a feel-good kind of approach to make the code, try to come closer to matching the code, but in the reality of the world, it doesn't actually solve the problem. There's safety issues with traffic going to the blind end of the alley at Ardmore, pedestrians, children, bicycle traffic heading to the north on Ardmore are going to have to pass over with very little separation between them and the vehicles. Just too many difficulties that can all be addressed by a smaller footprint, whether it's the visibility triangles, the inefficiency of the pavers, the problems with paving in the neighborhood. I think that the machination meter that the gentleman that I mentioned talked about is very high on this project, and that should be a warning sign to us that it's just more complicated and requires more allowances and more adjustments than it should. So I would request, I know that this process gives the last word to the petitioner, but I would request that the last word should go to the people that live here, raise their kids here, pay the taxes here, and die here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Patrice Gallagher. I live at 36 South Monterey. I'd also like to say thank you so much for your service and thank you for allowing me to speak. I had some topics I wanted to talk about, but they've already been discussed. And I'm in agreement with everything that's been said. When I heard about this project, I asked if the developer lived here, and I find out, it's my understanding that he does not live here. I just felt that, it just felt disrespectful considering what our concerns are, that someone that doesn't live here would just come and want to build a building that has legitimate issues and concerns. So I just wanted to say that. And I want to say that Villa Park is not a home rule community, and this is in reference to the variance for the request for impervious surfaces. And therefore, it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that by all rights, unless the planning and zoning members have gotten specific acknowledgement by the village's own legal counsel, that members are not allowed to approve any deviation from code and village's rule of law. And I think that's all I have to say, and thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you.
Justina Zucker.
Justina.
Zucker, Z-U-C-K-E-R. K-E-R. My question is, how far away from the site is the nearest grocery store, train station, bus stop, and nearest restaurant?
And what?
nearest restaurant. And I'm sorry, my accent kicks in when I'm nervous. Because I'm asking about that, especially that bus stop, because in previous presentation that we saw, I saw on, recording on YouTube, builder said that there is nearby bus stop. The only bus stop I can think of, it's the one that takes kids to school. And if the building is going to be built in a way, like it's presented now, it's going to be very dangerous situation for my kids. I have toddlers that run away. I know that that's my responsibility to keep them safe. So this is why I'm here. I want to make it, the safest place possible for them to live. So my question is, where that bus stop is, because and that relates really to that self-regulating, no need for more cars, more parking spaces, because people are going to walk. Walkability. This is about really walkability. What the builder tries to say over here. Our neighborhood, it's not very walkable. The average walkability score in Villa Park, it's 49. That's pretty low. Let me see. Transit score of 21 and bike score of 49.
What is the score of 21?
Transit score of 21. Transit. Bike score of 49. Even though there's a bike path right there, it's all about how we're going to get our groceries. There's jewelry over here, but who's going to carry all those groceries? Forgot to mention that we really have two downtowns.
You have what?
Two downtowns. We don't have a really one considering downtown, and it's because two villages were at one point, put together. Villa Park began in 1908, and town of Ardmore in 1910, and Summit Avenue was the dividing line.
What was the dividing Summit?
Summit, yes, Summit Avenue. So those two downtowns, this is why we have, two downtowns, and we always, where this town, needed different types of transportation than biking, walking, train. We need cars to get to all those places that we need to go. More cars, more traffic, more unsafe situations, for people who live there. I don't like the idea that parking is going to be in the back, that alley is going to, create a lot of issues. I don't like how the space is being used. Those variances, they are there for a reason. And I would like my kids, myself, keep safe. And that's why I'm asking to vote no for those variances.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Yeah, please come up.
Jean Nicholson, Nicholson, 412 South Princeton. And I hate to see anything being built there. I think what we need is a parking lot. And if there's gonna be building on Ardmore, they're gonna need parking. You know, it would be nice to have the parking lot for the businesses that will be on Ardmore. We have the library, beautiful. We have 6 churches within a half a block. 3 are within a half a block, and 3 are within a block from us. We have, oh, it's just a beautiful neighborhood, mixed, oh golly, I don't want to see a building there. I want to see a parking lot for the gazebo. They use it. If you ever come any of these events at the gazebo, their parking lot is loaded. All those parking lots there. And I just hate to see a building go up. I think we need the parking lot. And if there is new development on Ardmore, well, they can park in there. But thank you.
Thank you.
Did I make a record?
You're close. I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you again. You got the record again tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak on this item? Okay, because there won't be additional opportunity unless, okay. So then we will move to questions from the commission. So I'm going to run through a couple of things I think I can answer that were brought up. I'm also going to have someone from the village come up and speak generally about flooding, because I know that was looked at. We'll get to that in a second. One point that I do want to raise, though, is I understand that this site has served as a overflow parking lot for a lot of uses for probably decades. There hasn't been a bank in decades, but that in and of itself is not the responsibility of the property owner. It's not the responsibility of the property owner to put porta-johns there for Summerfest, even if we like it. The previous owner may have done that, but that is not the obligation of any owner, just like it's not the obligation of Sterling Funeral Home to allow overflow parking on their site, which they may have in the past. Private landowners do have landowner rights. On the issue of snow removal, I'll just answer that because it came up last time. They will have a snow removal plan, just like the apartments across the street and just like every other residential use does. If the applicant wants to speak to that more, but multi-unit apartment buildings, commercial developments, they make snow removal work. And if there are issues, then the village will have enforcement problems with that. There was a question about grocery store, train station, bus stop, and restaurant. Believe it or not, there's one of each of those within 2 blocks. I mean, if you consider Stoljan's a restaurant, that's it's. But no, I know. But there is a bus stop 2 blocks to the south at Washington. There's a grocery store 2 blocks to the north at Ardmore and St. Charles, and that's not. It's a quarter of a mile. It's okay. But it's close. It's walking distance. Yeah. I'm sorry. This is the time at the dais up here. The train station's arguably farther. I grant that, but it's walkable for those who want to walk. If the applicant wants to speak to that more and how walkability scores work for them, they can. Okay. That's all the specific things I have. So I would ask the applicant first, are there any of those questions that you want to address? I think if you want to speak maybe to where you've added, let me run through a couple of them that I think I can maybe guide you on.
Sure.
That I have written down.
Excuse
So,
me, I just have 2 minutes.
yeah, sure. All right, so we're gonna get going again. So before we begin, I just want to say one more time, I had an opportunity to speak, so please respect our time up here. The court reporter is trying to record what we're talking. That people are watching on video, and the crosstalk it's just disruptive. So I'd appreciate if you could be respectful in that regard. So, can you tell us just a little bit about where you added additional either pervious or semi-pervious surfaces on the site?
Yes, the change of the parking from angled to perpendicular allowed for that, number one. Number two, between the parking and the building, we have a curb stop as opposed to the individual parking stops. And beyond that curb, there's 2.5 feet of green space. So along that whole rear, is times 2.5, I forgot what the number is, 150 feet, let's call it, times 2.5 has been added also. And that 2.5, someone had brought it up, not being enough, we can make it 3. I think Public Works, we were told, usually recommends 2. We can make that any number that anyone's comfortable with.
Okay.
But in that respect, then that would sort of affect the drive aisle width at the alley. Is that?
Well, we would still keep the space 18 feet.
I understand.
Of the 18, 2.5 of that is green.
Right, but you're
so we
saying
can go to 3, but it would still be 18. It'd be 3 green, 15 asphalt. Or we can go 2 and 16, if that helps.
So the full depth from building to end of stall is locked in at 18.
Is 8, right?
In your calculus.
Exactly.
Okay, and it's my understanding that meets code in terms of the way the curb, the parking stop works as a curb, and that is an additional.
We thought it was a creative way to add more green space.
Yeah. Okay. And then related to that, you know, the walkway is intended to be at the rear. What is the depth of that space between the back of the stalls and the alley now?
6.87, it was 4. A while back, Public Works had recommended we have at least 3. So when we had the angled, we had 4, and now that we went perpendicular, we have almost 7. So almost double what Public Works had recommended in the beginning.
Okay, and then at the rear, you've increased those stalls to 9.5 feet.
Correct.
They were previously 9, I believe.
They used to be 9. We made them wider to 9.5 because of the turning radius. Again, Public Works seemed to be on board and okay with us keeping them 9 and having a 22-foot radius, but we were able to go 9.5, which, of course, again, as I said, the wider you go, the less turning radius you need. And I gave some examples that, you know, the city actually allows.
Okay.
Can I ask just a question to clarify that? What was the
No,
5 feet that he's not putting in?
Yeah, hang on.
Remember, he was supposed to have 5 feet behind the building, he's not having that? Is that the area we're talking
Yeah,
about
well,
right now?
yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
So, yeah, so she's asking whether or not so the landscape variation question is at the rear of the building. And we'll talk about that in more detail when we get to the individual variations. But currently providing, is it 2.5 feet? 2 feet?
Correct.
2.5 feet?
Correct.
Okay.
It could be 2, it could be 3, but we thought 2.5 was the right.
And 5 would be what was required by code.
And we're, that 5 feet, we'd like clarification on that. The way we read it, it was 5 feet where there's public access. And we didn't really read it that the rear of the property, and especially an alley side, would need 5 feet of landscaping. And we were curious what other projects, because we thought we saw some other projects recently that didn't have that and didn't have a variance for that. So we were surprised by that one.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll discuss that more. I
Okay.
think it's probably intended, generally speaking, for when you have buildings sited near the middle of a site. That way you have landscaping on 4 sides instead of 1 or 2.
Sure.
Okay. So this might be a little bit comment, a little bit question. The blind spot, people are asking again about the blind spot in the triangle, site triangle. What we want to clarify is that, and you can maybe explain it a little bit for those that weren't here before, but that stop bar and that island are pushing the stop line out to increase visibility beyond the building.
Well
Correct.
beyond the building, yes.
Yeah, because currently the stop line is back, I know it's closer to the building. It may, well, I guess it's not behind the building currently, but behind the property line. Or near it. Is there an aerial photo in one of those?
I don't have
Okay,
one
that's okay.
on the slides.
That's okay, but the stop bar is pushed north, and there's a landscaped island being added at the northwest corner that actually pushes the stop out to increase visibility, and I know that's something that the applicant has worked with staff on, and that the final exact design of that would have to go through engineering, but conceptually, that's something that they're offering to do as part of this project. Let's see. So I would say, were there any other questions that you were presented or comments where you would like to address anything before we start asking additional questions up here?
There didn't seem to be any new questions or new things brought up that we didn't already address, so I don't want to, go over that again. The flooding issue was brought up a lot, and someone said we're going to make the area worse, but again, we are actually going to make it better. Again, we're not meeting the 70%, but we are going to have less impervious than is there now, and we are going to have permeable pavers than aren't there now. And it seemed like it was also brought up, the number of units or the number of stories would impact stormwater. Well, I mean, if it's a one-story building with the same footprint as a five-story building, the impact is identical. It's the footprint that impacts it, not the number of units, and not, it has to do with the footprint of the building, not the number of stories or the number of units will impact the stormwater. But if there's a problem there now, which it sounds like there has been for 20 years, obviously whether we do this development or not, that should be addressed. But we certainly wouldn't be making it worse. We should actually be making it better.
Yeah, and that, please, show the applicant some respect, please. So I'm gonna ask, so if that's all you have, then I'm gonna
But
ask.
there was one more.
Oh, go ahead.
One more quick thing. Someone said we didn't have permeable pavers. We do. Someone mentioned how permeable pavers may or may not work. Obviously, when we're doing permeable pavers, they are spec'd out by the permeable paver company. They've gone through testing. They know obviously how much drainage they can have or not have. And obviously when we install them, we need to install them according to design. The last thing was the beer truck. Again, we did, I guess, talk about this before, but it is an illegal use of the alley. It needs to stop. I mean, obviously, from that picture that you could see, that's just blatant disregard for the use of the alley and the laws. You can't park in the alley like that. You can't put your supplies, your beer in the alley. They should be doing something, again, regardless of our development or not. That's just not fair to the residents.
Okay, I appreciate that, and
Could I speak to Craig for a second?
yeah, you're gonna need to, if you could come up to them, or you just want to speak to him.
I want to bring a couple points
Okay.
up, whether he wants to bring them to the committee or not.
And the last thing, the shape of the lot is a hardship. If it was square, like most lots are, we could pick up 2 or 3 parking spaces very easily, but the fact that it is a trapezoid like that does create a hardship for us.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Okay, so I'm going to ask staff to clarify a few things, but I do also have 2 email that I think I'll just read them into the record, Ellen. They're pretty short. The first one was from Mike Orlowski, who's a commissioner. Mike Orlowski, Orlowski. He is a commissioner, and he wrote in to say that even though he's unable to attend tonight's special meeting, he's looked at the packet and would vote to approve the petitioner's request. And then there was an email that came in this evening from Bob Wagner, and he writes, hello all. I want to bring to the attention of those copied that some misleading and erroneous statements made by Ross Builders during its last presentation to the Planning and Zoning Commission as it relates to the Traffic and Safety Commission. Ross Builders repeatedly stated that Traffic and Safety had approved their project. When Ross Builders first appeared before Traffic and Safety earlier in the year, there was no traffic assessment available, and they made a very general presentation about the project. Whereas there were some positive comments about the project from the commissioners, there was no formal approval of the project from the Traffic and Safety Commission. In fact, at the June meeting of the Traffic and Safety Commission, a formal vote was postponed until the July meeting. I'm sorry that this email is coming so close to your meeting tonight, but I wanted to set the record straight on this issue. And that's Bob Wagner, W-A-G-N-E-R.
Can I comment on that last email?
I'm going to comment on it real quick, because I actually don't believe that that was how it was represented to us at the last hearing. There will be a transcript and there's a video for anybody that wants to go back and read that. I know there was some of that maybe at the initial plan review where there was some uncertainty what the commission had done. But I do believe that we were informed either by staff or Mr. Ross of how that was proceeding, and that there was an additional meeting to come, which I believe is next week. I think, I'm not sure the date on that. Maybe we get that from Ellen and later.
July 5th.
July 5th? Okay. So yeah, the traffic and safety meeting would be July 5th. And then now I'm going to ask for some
Can
information.
I comment on that real
ahead.
quick, that email? I don't think we ever used the word approved. I think the word we used was supported. I know certainly that was what was in our PowerPoint. And that word supported is directly from the minutes of the Traffic and Safety Commission meeting that we were at, so that we got that language directly from that meeting in the minutes.
Yeah, and I know that we were informed that there was another meeting to come and that no formal decision had been made, so, but.
Right, in the subsequent meeting, no decision has been made, but in the meeting that we initially went to, they did support it.
And both of those email that came to me will go into the public record as well. So, Kevin, did you want to speak to you did some flooding surveying or something along those lines?
With regard to those who raised issues about drainage tonight, for those of you who mentioned systems you have that are not working, or on the neighbor's property that are not working, reach out to us, please. We'd like to investigate that and see if we can determine why that's the case. I'm aware of the systems that are out there. If there's something that, stopped functioning, something that changed, we'd like to look into that and figure out why. So if you want to come talk to me after the meeting, reach out to Public Works, either one of those options. For those others who mentioned systems that are either designed or under design, I wish that we could have moved those forward sooner. I wish we had the funding to move those forward. We will still continue to try to move those forward and get better prices. We're hoping that the market cooperates with that. All of those things said, I think it's worth mentioning that this development, as with all developments in the village, will be required to comply with the DuPage County Stormwater Ordinance, as well as Village of Villa Park Ordinance, which a detailed review for has not yet been completed, but will be. A detailed review has not yet been performed. Typically that takes place after any planning and zoning approvals. To that end, the site actually currently drains to the north and to the east. So while we're aware of the drainage concerns, we hear them. I understand that doesn't alleviate anyone's issues with them, let alone make them go away. But all that said, the site currently has very little impact in terms of the drainage on the surrounding area, in spite of the existing issues, and would not be allowed to create any adverse impacts, would be required to demonstrate that it does not create any adverse impacts on the surrounding area. That will all, of course, like I said, take place during a detailed stormwater review to come if this development moves forward.
All right, and could you spell your last name for the record, please?
Sure, it's Mantles, Manteles.
Thank you. All right. Anybody have any other questions for staff or for the petitioner?
I have a question for staff, and I'd just like to clarify it. Ellen or Mr. Mantles, does the village plow that alley?
Yes, Public Works Operations Division does plow that alley.
Okay. That was my question.
I have a question for the petitioner. We brought up a couple of instances in the previous two meetings where we talked about the directional curbing exiting the drive from underneath the building, referenced as a half pork chop. That hasn't been addressed, shown, indicated, drawn. Can you provide some insight as to why that has not been explored and presented to us?
And maybe Ellen could comment on it, but we got a comment back from staff saying it was up in the air, that it seemed like staff, some wanted it, some didn't want it. We're open to do it. We can do it if it needs to be done, but we just need direction from someone who says it definitely should be done or definitely shouldn't be done. So we left it as is, but we're certainly open to do it.
I was just curious, we're aware of that, sort of sad. And
Does anyone from staff want to speak to that?
Staff was neutral on it.
If you were to add the pork chop, it does change the directional approach to the project, with people only able to enter the garage from the north or exit going to the north. It did not, however, change the lot coverage because the pork chop would be in the public right-of-way portion. It would, however, add additional greenway in the public right-of-way, so greening up the general area, but it did not change the lot coverage on the site. So we felt that was a decision best left to the commission and the village board. We could have gone either way.
Can you define the pork chop for us?
When you look at the driveway, you can, hold on one sec. Okay, so I'll use the pointer. You can see how there's a triangular approach on either side. There's a driveway flare.
Right.
And if this southern triangle went away this way, so cut a triangle off, you've then flared the driveway. So when you come out, you have to make a right-hand turn. Okay.
Thank you.
You're essentially creating a right turn out, left turn in only situation. So, and staff does not have a strong opinion one way or the other on that.
Correct.
Thank you.
Are we allowed to address that? Because we
No.
thought that was part of the plan already.
Yeah, I'm
No,
sorry,
it's
you
not?
can't, no. And could you just state your name again so she gets
Sure,
it?
it's Molly Cars.
Yeah, so,
A-R-C-Z.
yeah, the questions have been asked, and that's something we've asked of the petition, I'm sure.
I have a question for staff. Ellen, perhaps you'd be best to answer this. The two apartment complexes directly to the south of 27 West Park, are those Highland Avenue address buildings?
I believe so. I would have to confirm that. Kevin, do you know? They
Okay.
are.
Do either of those buildings have a 5-foot rear foundation landscaping in what is considered the rear of their property lots?
I don't,
Of their property lots.
I don't believe that they do. Remember that the code changed in 2018 where landscaping was required for the first time. And some of the other buildings that have been built recently did not have the rear foundation. It's not required in districts where there's zero lot line buildings generally.
Thank you.
I mean, I think generally the intent of that ordinance would be like if you had a building sited within, like if you imagine a building that's surrounded by parking, you would have room to landscape between the building and whatever sidewalk or parking. I don't know that necessarily envisions the back of a building on an alley, but I don't know the specific intent of it, but that would be my guess. We can talk
Chairman
about that.
Jarrett?
Yes.
If I may, I looked at the code again. I'm always one where if I've made a mistake, I'll admit it, even if it's humbling in public. But I'm always going to take a conservative approach. And when the case was first published, I did not include a variance for the rear foundation landscaping. And when we were discussing it at the last minute, I thought, well, maybe we better add it conservatively, just like the drive aisle approach. And if I read the code, it says, no foundation landscaping is required for buildings built on a lot line, buildings in the MX1, MX2, and MX3 districts, or for areas where there is no public access. So the question then becomes, these parking spaces to the rear, are they private or are they public? You could interpret it that no foundation landscaping is required there the more I think about it. So that's an interpretation that the commission has not yet had to make with the new code. It hasn't come up before. This is the first time with this project. And as you know, every time we get a new project in a new district, we're learning how our new code works for us. So I am comfortable with an interpretation that the variance actually is not needed, and I was correct the first time. I'll leave that to you.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add to that, that's what I had mentioned before, the public access. we didn't feel that was the rear of the property with private parking doesn't seem like public access to us.
And-
Which is why we didn't include it as a variance at our meeting prior.
Okay. Are there other questions?
I have a question for Mr. Ross. I know it was mentioned at the last meeting and it was mentioned tonight again, but the development that's going on Downers Grove?
Yes.
So bigger lot, less units?
Correct.
Correct, just the gist of it. I mean, I guess, like, I'll always speak to myself, but one of my biggest hangups last time, given all the variances requests, was the parking. Why continue to push for so many units? Like, and I believe eliminating that last floor, the fourth floor in this unit, would alleviate that need. And given that we know it's a smaller lot, I mean, why is that an option? What's the thought process behind a larger building on a smaller lot here in town?
Well, I don't want to comment on other projects. We actually, we got some comments that I would say are, well, personally attacking and attacking other projects. And so we don't want to really get into that here in tonight in this forum. But I will say from, this project specifically, that's what works for us for the design and we think within the code.
Well, we know it's not within the code, or else we wouldn't be here. So, I mean, let's not split hairs on a certain level, but.
Well, the size is within the code, and the height is within the code.
If this fell within code, we wouldn't be here. That's our fundamental issue that we're sort of dealing with, correct?
Well, I'm talking about the size.
I understand.
I think
I was talking about eliminating rooms in a nutshell, but eliminating that floor would eliminate rooms.
I think he was talking about size, and again, we're 4 stories, it could be 5. We could go 32 one-bedrooms and have the parking for that. So, as someone else had brought up, and if, that's the direction that you'd prefer us to go, we certainly can go that direction. But we felt 4 stories would be enough, and think that would be more appropriate for the area.
Are there other questions? Okay, then we can move to discussion by commission members. I think the way we could approach this is we can talk generally before we get into the specifics of each variation. But we will discuss each variation. And then I think at the end, we will I think we'll discuss each one and then at the end take a motion on each one separately. So what we're really looking for here are, there's talk of hardship, but we're really looking at particular hardships and practical difficulties. The other thing that is sometimes mentioned is that making more money can't be the sole reason for variation, but the ability to make a reasonable return on a property can be a consideration. I'm not saying that the applicant has made the case for that or not, but that can be a consideration. So then I guess, does anybody want to make any comments generally or just dive right into discussion of the individual variations?
Did we close the public hearing?
No, we're going to close the public hearing later, because we want all this discussion on the record. Anything general? I mean, well, there'll be more chance to have general comments. So, let me get the page open with the variations here.
Or do you want the memo? Or the back of the memo?
Just making sure I've got the right memo. I've got too many memos open.
Okay. So
Old ones, new ones.
it's the most recent one, page 17.
June 9th.
Motions.
That's the old one.
There we go.
All right, so the first motion that the first variation we'd be looking at would be a motion to approve a variation to allow for 33 spaces where 33 spaces where 37 spaces are required. In terms of the hardship on that one, I do believe that there's a couple of hardships and practical difficulties here. I do believe that the shape of the subject property does present some design difficulties in that if it were right angles, I think you probably could pick up 2 or 3 parking spaces. Probably 2 inside and 1 maybe outside. I would also just note that in terms of kind of the spirit of the code, the closing of the driveways on Park is actually adding an additional 6 parking spaces, one of which is ADA compliant on Park. Thought of in that way, they're actually would be over. I know they can't count that. If it was a commercial use in the ground floor though, they could. Obviously overnight parking would be the potential issue there. There are other thoughts on, what are the thoughts generally on that variation? I'm if you want to discuss or.
I mean, I do appreciate the net gain in public parking. I think that would be a good add to that area for sure. The build out of the peninsula is a good add to that area. I'm still struggling with the need, the hardship for the variation there. I feel like, units could be lost, or whatever it is, bedrooms, we'll say, could be lost in the reconfiguration of the design. I don't think it's a hardship. It was designed that way, needing a variance by design. So I'm going to honestly struggle to be okay with that one.
Okay. Anybody else have comments or discussion on that one? Thoughts? Okay. And obviously, before we make formal motions, if you have any other thoughts, questions, comments, want to go back, we can always do that. A motion to approve less than 24-foot wide aisle width per section 7.9 parking area design based upon the findings. Per section 7.9 parking area design based upon the findings of, I'll leave that part off for now. So that's they're providing essentially 22 feet, including the alley at the rear. There's a couple things going on there. One is that 24-foot wide drive aisle envisions parking on both sides on the same property. That's kind of what that code is designed for. It's not necessarily designed for an alley. You have, to get to that 24 feet, you'd be asking the petitioner to give another 2 feet while not simultaneously asking the property owners on the other side who back into it now to give anything. Again, I would also say on that one, they actually had more, we asked them to turn it perpendicular. The village wanted them to turn perpendicular. That does change the geometry at the rear. That's one I don't have any problem with based on parking standards generally in terms of they've added 9.5-foot stalls, which is also something I would mention in relation to the first one. with the 9.5-foot stalls, if they went to 9-foot stalls, they could almost squeeze another parking space in the rear. I don't know that.
I don't know if you can, given the
Yeah.
utility poles that are
Yeah,
in
I think,
place.
and I believe that was mentioned by engineering, that the placement of the ADA stall does not allow it to be pushed to the west. But they are providing 9.5-foot stalls in the back, to make sure that the turning radius is, I would say, not just sufficient, more than sufficient. Anyone have any questions, comments on that? Okay, so then we've got a motion to approve garage entry on the side yard, which is Princeton, where only rear entrance is permitted.
Where only
Rear entrance is permitted. With that one, we've discussed the code, and I know staff has been supportive of that one. It envisions, when possible, for the entrance to be not on the primary street, to be at the rear. And actually, were this a surface parking lot, I believe, if this were a surface parking lot, they would be able to have, correct me if I'm wrong, Ellen, if this was a surface parking lot, would they be able to have an entrance on Princeton? Or no?
It's the same location, it would have to be off the primary street. In this instance, we do believe this is the best way to go because the cars have to get into the garage and you're just loading
Yeah.
more into the alley where you'd do it from the rear.
And this is probably this is one where the site geometry definitely impacts the ability to lay out parking. Anything off the rear is you're gonna have turning issues with cars going in and out, and you're losing parking spaces both on the alley and in the building.
I do have an aerial if you want me to put it up, if that helps you,
Yeah, that would be good.
as you make your recommendations.
Yes, you are correct on that. If it was a surface lot, there could be limited side yard access to a parking
Yeah.
lot.
And so
Limited
that's
to
one where the hardships, to a certain degree, created by the code, because we do have a desire to not have that curb cut be on Park. And I have, just personally have strong opinions that the curb cuts on Park are not good for Park. But certainly not a garage entrance. Any questions, comments, thoughts on that? Okay, so a motion to approve 85% impervious lot coverage and make sure these numbers are all right. 2.5% semi-pervious lot coverage.
Say again, 2.5?
2.5% semi-pervious lot coverage, where a maximum impervious coverage of 70%, an additional semi-pervious cover of 25% is allowed.
Mr. Chairman, may I, I'll put the motions up here, and remember they're motions to recommend approval by the village board. It's not a motion to approve, it's a motion to recommend approval.
Yeah, and when we go to the actual motions, I'll make sure we get all the proper language in there. So on this one, I think there's going to be some questions, debate. I know that at the previous meeting that the applicant said they would try to get pervious, semi-pervious pavers where they could, but there were concerns, maintenance concerns about having them installed in parking areas due to the combination of wear and tear from road salt, freeze thaw, and wear and tear from road salt and freeze and thaw, the winter cycle, and as well as the weight of vehicles over time. Again, towards kind of the spirit of the ordinance, I would again point out that they're adding approximately 5% of pervious surface either at the site perimeter in areas that are currently asphalt, or the landscape island at the northwest corner. So while they may not be there, they're actually in the entire project area, reducing the total impervious surface more than that number alone would point to. Questions, comments?
I could say I'm kind of torn on this one, because it is an improvement. Yeah, the time to improve and meet code is now, but you look at the surrounding areas and you have a parking lot next to it, which is completely impervious. Standard Meadery looks like it's completely impervious as well.
What does?
Standard Meadery, the next business over. I don't know that for a fact.
Meadery, M-E-A-D-R-Y.
In fact, all the way to the corner, looks like it's just concrete all the way. So, you know, the nature of the impervious materials on that entire area is really high. So does making an improvement in this one help? And it would.
Yeah, and Ellen, could you remind me, I don't have the right memo in front of me, that there are fees in lieu related to stormwater on this site, correct?
Yes, final engineering has not yet been done. They're not at the building permit process. And if the project moves forward, the building permit process would include a review of the engineering and the stormwater. And that's when Kevin Mantles and the village engineers would look at the stormwater and what would happen. And if they are unable to meet the engineering requirements of stormwater retention and release rates, there is the option in the code for a fee in lieu provision.
Okay.
Right, correct? Kevin says correct.
Okay. Any additional thoughts, questions, comments on that one? All right, so the next one's streetscape area from 0 feet to 10 feet where minimum. Did you have something to add, Ellen?
I was just going to say something, backing up 1 minute. There was confusion over the percentages of lot coverage. The case was published for 90% because I believe the original first submittal was 90% and it's been decreased down to the 85. That's why you see different numbers as the site plan has changed. That 85% is the current impervious. And the code is a bit quirky in that it lays out a requirement for impervious, semi-pervious, and then the remaining 5% is to be pervious. It's not a 70% impervious, 30% open space. It considers the quality of the materials on every corner of the site and the pervosity that they provide to the site. It's a bit different than you would expect.
Okay. So we've streetscape area from 0 feet to 10 feet where a minimum 13 feet streetscape area is required along street frontages. I think Ellen spoke to this one pretty well earlier, but we're really talking about where two aspects of the code, they don't conflict per se. They just meet in a way that creates a hardship with the code for the applicant, in that the code, the streetscape area is designed to create essentially a separation from the building to the street. By cutting in parking here, that's reduced what would have been, without that situation, then there would be plenty of room to meet the code here. And the building actually does meet the setback requirement as far as it relates to the property line. And then additionally, I think here, again, kind of to the spirit of the code, they're actually proposing the bump out, which kind of recreates some sense of streetscape on a street that really doesn't have any streetscape to speak of, other than parked cars. And I would encourage the village to find other ways to increase the quality of the streetscape along there, whether or not this project goes ahead or not. Questions, comments, thoughts on that one? All right, so we've got a motion to approve 0 feet of rear foundation landscaping where 5 feet is required. They're actually providing 2.5 feet, so we probably should modify that. Ellen, thoughts, or leave it at?
I think I would recommend you determine that the variation is not needed.
Okay.
Given that it's private space in the rear, I think that we did not need to add that variation for consideration.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think, I do agree with staff that the intent of that is not to put landscape on an alley where salt and winter and
Nevertheless, Ellen, I want to thank you for bringing that to our attention and bringing it to the public's attention. Shows how incredibly transparent staff is being with the public. I very passionately thank you for bringing this point up.
I guess the question is, out of the sake of cautiousness, would it be worth just, I mean, voting on it anyway?
I have
No?
I have
think-
no objection to bringing
You
it
what?
forward. I have no objection in bringing this forward.
It looks like the village attorney
Perhaps
may have a
counsel.
comment.
Melissa Wolf, WOLF. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Ellen. I believe that this board should make a determination as to whether or not the variation is required.
Okay.
If it's determined that no variation is required because of there being no public access to the site, then you don't need to make a recommendation to the
Okay.
village board in this regard.
So then I would ask for a voice vote on whether we believe that that variation is required at the rear. Is all in favor of that?
What is the vote?
Whether or not variation 6, a motion to recommend approval of a reduction of rear foundation from 5 to 0 feet. All in favor of not needing that variation?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed to that? Okay, I think based on the recommendation of staff and council that we will strike that one. The final is, would be to grant relief from the visibility triangle per section 9.3 in order to accommodate the required build-to zones. Again, there is some conflict in our code related to some of the MX districts, specifically the MXT district, where we want the buildings close to the corner when it's practical, but that could potentially be within the site triangle. In this instance, I would mention 2 things. One, there is a code, a text amendment working its way through the village now that would ultimately put discretion on engineering for that in the MX districts to determine whether or not they were necessary based on the specifics of the site and play. But additionally, they are actually proposing to move the stop line and out away from the building, and vehicles will be stopping far north of the corner of the property. I believe that was made clear both in exhibits from the staff and from the petitioner in the previous public hearing. Personally, I think the improvement at the corner will make this corner safer, in terms of the the island and I actually would like to see the village find a way to, I believe, we could have more cross connections for pedestrians between our north-south streets and the Prairie Path.
Chairman Jarrett, if I could, for the benefit of our residents, a little more explanation on what the visibility triangle is. It's an urban design element in that the MX districts are all intended to bring the buildings closer to the street to create a more pedestrian-friendly atmosphere and slow traffic down and just change the general feel as you move through the community in the commercial and transitional districts. That's along St. Charles Road and here along the path. And some of the MX districts are already exempted out from the triangle because they have zero lot line building setbacks. So if you've got the building at zero lot line, meaning built on the lot line, there's no way you can create that triangle, which is measured from the point where the two lot lines intersect at the corner. And what we're finding is that even when we've got this district, which is a 5 to 10 foot setback, you still can't create the visibility triangle. So the commission has previously talked about this at 2 previous meetings. We're going through a text amendment at the same time right now where we are trying to correct some of the conflicts we're finding in the code, and this was one of them, and there has been consensus already to modify the visibility triangle. We would like to gain it wherever it is possible, and therefore the recommendation from staff is going to be that the village engineer have final discretion on a visibility triangle so that we can get it wherever we can get it, but where it's not practical, it's just not practical. I do believe, Mr. Chairman, you have another question from the audience. I don't know if you want to entertain.
While you were addressing us, since you brought up a new comment to us, I had a question about the visibility triangle with the new northern moved stop bar.
Mr. Misterino, I do disagree with you. You do feel that adding that peninsula is going to be a negative impact?
Well, you would look at cars. I'm just asking about the visibility triangle. When you're viewing through cars and delivering things.
I do believe that adding the peninsula, you've asked for the record for the minutes, if adding that peninsula is creating a new site blockage.
Yes.
I do believe right now, when you come up to the corner, you have those cars parked there already, and adding the new peninsula island will enable cars to come closer north, and they will have better visibility. I do believe the peninsula will increase visibility. That's just my professional opinion.
And I would also point out that the exact design of that island and that intersection would have to go through village engineering, and it's if what the applicant has proposed, and I know they've worked with staff, but there may be some minor modifications that have to be made to that island, the exact location of the stop bar. But I mean, generally speaking, I trust our village engineers to get there. I don't think anybody wants to create a more dangerous intersection. Okay, so are there, that one seems pretty straightforward to me, but are there any questions, comments on that one? Okay, so that is all the variations we've discussed. I guess then I would ask now, before we start having motions, if anybody has any specific final comments they would want to make generally or about any of these motions before we start making motions.
Can we talk maybe just briefly about parking again?
Yes.
And my question, Ellen, is for you. In the covered parking, there is an ADA spot. Is that required?
The code requires, and we have adopted the state of Illinois accessibility code. And when you have parking lots 25 spaces and under, one of those spaces must be ADA. It's not an additional space, it's one within the required amount. If 25 or less are required. Once you go to 26, it's 2. And ADA spaces need to be as close as possible to the entrance doors.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the space is there. The space on the street on Park is because once you, you look at a block, so the civil side of engineering, the engineers look at how many spaces exist on a block when you walk around it without crossing the street. And so creating those additional 6 spaces on the north side of Park puts us at over 25 spaces with all of the street parking when you look at Ardmore and rounding the corner to Park. So that's why we needed another ADA space on the public right-of-way. Correct, Kevin? He says correct.
So, if all of these units were rented and there wasn't a tenant that needed the ADA spot, what would happen to that spot?
It's required by state law. It has to remain.
So it couldn't just be assigned to a tenant? Then?
Correct.
So potentially it just has to sit there vacant?
Correct. Well, Kevin?
I'm not.
I think it still has to sit there that way.
Okay. And what if there were 2 tenants that needed accessible parking spaces?
You know, I did uncover, guess what, another conflict in the code. In that, in the building code, we directly adopt the state accessibility code. In the zoning code, we have modified it to be a little bit more restrictive. The state Illinois accessibility code in its last edition allowed for 2 spaces to share the one 8-foot aisle. And I was going to bring that up in one of our next text amendments. So there is the possibility that the drive aisle could be moved in the middle and 2 spaces could share it. And because we've got that conflict, it's not much of a conflict, but it's 2 different interpretations between 2 different sections of the code.
So the state code allows you to share
An 8-foot
an 8-foot
accessible.
drive aisle. So theoretically, with amending our text to match the state, or to match the state code,
I would
then this
recommend-
development could theoretically pick up another, I mean, I'm not going to say they could, but
Correct. You could put
a
the
parking
2
space could be picked up in some scenarios. Let's
You
put
could
it
put
that
the
way.
2 ADA spaces in the building sharing a drive aisle and have an additional space on the alley, correct?
Okay.
And I've talked to the engineering staff, and I did this in a previous community. I think the best recommendation for any community is to just merely adopt the state code.
I would agree with that.
So that would then remove the further restriction requiring each space to have its own 8-foot drive aisle and allowing them to be shared. And then you're correct, you could pick up an additional space.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, whether or not this specific development could is up to the applicant, the petition, the permitting, all of that. But theoretically, a development could pick up a spot.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, for our residents, there are 3 codes that the state of Illinois requires every community has to adopt as a bare minimum. It's the state plumbing code, the accessibility code, and the state energy code. And so every town is always on the most current version of those.
Okay, thank you.
What's the question? Please. I have a counsel for question if she's willing. Thank you. With regards to the ADA compliance issue of the parking spots that we're just talking about, are you aware of any authority that allows for relief of the ADA required spots when no tenant has a need for such?
I am not aware of that.
Thank you.
All right, so anybody else, you got any other comments or?
Well, I mean, I'm struggling with the parking issue as well, and the variance requested for that. So that means there are 22 indoor parking spaces. Is that correct? What I'm looking at here, but it's 12 and 10.
Yeah, I believe that's.
So
correct.
there isn't even enough indoor parking spaces for every unit in this building. And my opinion, and this is just my opinion, outdoor parking in northern Illinois is certainly not a luxury building in January. So I am really struggling with the variance for that. And this is not a neighborhood where we can kind of get it close. It's not like the other developments we've looked at where there's overflow parking that might be available. There just isn't here. So if we don't get it right, we're going to struggle with it for a long, long time. And there's going to be then street parking. I'm not really fully informed of what the parking is for the two buildings on Highland. I've been by there a couple times, but I do see a lot of cars around there. I don't know if that building is a one-bedroom or two-bedroom units, but there does seem to be a large number of cars in that neighborhood for those two buildings. I just think the parking is an issue that has to be right, not just today. It has to be right 5 years from now and 10 years from now. And I'm not there right now.
Okay. Any other discussion before we have motions?
Can I just add one fact for you, previously discussed? The Jewel is 0.5 miles, and the train station is 1.0 miles.
Okay.
I Google mapped them.
Yeah,
Thank you, Ellen. I was going to mention that. I live right there. And
and
in 10 years, and I'm not contradicting you, Jason, but in the 10 years I've lived there, I've walked to the Jewel twice. Honestly. This summer.
Well, I understand.
When I had nowhere else to go or nothing to do.
Right, and that's why I mean, in transit-oriented development, you're usually looking at two radiuses. One's a quarter mile, one's a half mile.
Yeah.
And I agree that while I would not say the train station it's walkable, but it's not ideally walkable. Ardmore, if you had to, I mean, Jewel, if you had to,
Sure.
you could. And most people don't want to walk to the grocery store for a lot of reasons.
Especially in January.
Especially in January. Okay. Okay.
I do have one other question.
Uh-huh.
Slightly, it's off tangent from the parking. But you did tell us that the village plows the alley. Correct. I'm not assuming that you know the particular answer to this, but I think someone in this room does. Where does the snow go? I'm looking at you, Ms. Fogarty.
You're asking me where the village puts the snow is?
Yes.
Your guess is as good as mine.
I'm going to guess Kevin.
It goes on the land by Sturley's parking lot. It goes on the
I can state that our policy is to plow it out to Princeton and then do what we call windrow it. Plow it out to Princeton Avenue and then windrow it on Princeton Avenue. But I'm not in operations, so.
And windrow means?
It just means to push it down the street as if we were plowing the snow that was already there. Basically to disperse it evenly so that it's not in one place.
In reality, it's loaded on the land by the parking.
I appreciate it, but we've got she's trying to take names, and it's she being the court reporter.
Lack of information.
Yep. Yeah. I live on a corner where Lombard plows one way and Villa Park plows the other way, so I know what a pile of snow looks like. I get it coming and going. Okay, so if there's no other discussion or comments, then I'm going to ask, well, Justin, are you comfortable making all of these motions? Alternately, I can make the motions and...
It is my understanding that
if you're not going to vote for one, then that's, okay, let's just, well, okay, so the first one would be, I'll read them and ask. So I would entertain a motion to recommend approval of variation to allow for 33 spaces where 37 spaces are required per section 7.2 based upon the findings of fact identified in the record of PZ 220005. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion from Lutke. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, for point of clarification, a motion and a second doesn't indicate support or whether you're going to vote in support or denial of it. So my recommendation from a legal standpoint is that there be a motion and a second for each of the variations requested and then a vote taken. So the board members should not hesitate from moving or seconding a motion just to get on the record what the recommendation is in each variation.
Particularly since we're a recommending body as well. So having a vote on the record. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
We have a second from Case. So any questions or comments on the motion? Okay, roll call vote on that one. Calvert.
No.
Case.
Yes.
Ledke.
Yes.
Romano.
No.
Schlinsky.
No.
I vote yes. So that one is 3-3. We have a motion to recommend approval of a variation to allow for less than 24 feet wide aisle width per section 7.9 parking area design based upon the findings of fact identified in the record of PZ 220005. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. We have a motion and a second from Schlinsky and Ludke. Roll call on that. Calvert.
Yes.
Case.
Yes.
Ludke.
Yes.
Romano.
Yes.
Schlinsky.
Yes.
I too vote yes.
Could you advance
Could you
the next
advance
slide?
the slide, please, so we've got the right language, because it's not in the memo. Thank you. That's okay. A motion to recommend approval of a variation to allow for a garage entry on the side yard, Princeton Avenue, where only rear entrance is permitted per section 4.4.310, based upon the findings of fact identified in the record for PZ 220005. Motion
So moved.
and second.
I'll second.
We've got Schlinsky and Romano. Roll call. Calvert.
Yes.
Case.
Yes.
Ludke.
Yes.
Romano.
Yes.
Schlinsky.
Yes.
I too vote yes. We've got a motion to recommend approval of variation to allow for 85% impervious lot coverage and a 2.5 semi-pervious lot coverage where a maximum impervious coverage of 70% and additional semi-pervious cover of 25% is allowed per section 4.4.3.A.7 based upon the findings of fact identified in the record for PZ 220005. Motion?
I'll make that motion.
Ludke, second.
I'll second.
Is that Case?
Case.
Okay. Motion a second. Question or comments on that motion? Okay, roll call. Calvert,
No.
Case,
Yes.
Ludke,
Yes.
Romano,
No.
Schlinsky.
No.
I vote yes. That's 3-3. We advance the slide, please. Thank you. We have, that's the one that, oh, we need that one. A motion to recommend approval of a variation to allow a streetscape area from 0 feet to 10 feet where minimum 13 feet streetscape area is required along street frontages per section 4.5.2 build to zone based upon the findings of fact identified in the record for PZ 220005. Motion?
Make that motion.
Motion from Romano. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Schlinsky. Questions or comments on that motion? Okay, roll call. Calvert,
Yes.
Case,
Yes.
Ledke,
Yes.
Romano,
Yes.
Schlinsky.
Yes.
I too vote yes. 6, that's the one we determined we didn't need.
Correct.
7, a motion to recommend approval of a variation to grant relief from the visibility triangle per section 9.3 in order to accommodate required build-to zones based upon the findings of fact identified in the record of PZ 220005. In question, I guess we need a motion.
So moved.
Motion from Schlinsky, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ledke. Questions or comments on the motion? Roll call. Calvert,
Yes.
Case,
Yes.
Ledke,
Yes.
Romano,
Yes.
Schlinsky.
Yes.
I too vote yes. So with that, our recommendation passes to the village board. We are not the final decision makers. They can accept, reject, or modify the motions as they see fit. And that there will not be formal notice sent regarding that as there was for this public hearing, but the agendas will be published, so keep your eyes on the agendas. With that, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing. We have a motion to close the public hearing.
Make that motion.
Romano, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Calvert. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the public hearing is closed.
Mr. Chairman, over here.
Yes.
Can I just make a clarification for the record?
Yes.
Just so that the audience knows, the vote today was basically with respect to the parking space variance and the impervious lot coverage variance. That was a denial because it failed to receive a majority of the zoning board. So the recommendation to the village board will be a denial of those variances because of the failure to receive a majority. The other zoning variations with respect to the less than 24-foot wide aisle, garage entry on the side yard, streetscape area from 0 foot to 10 feet, and relief from the visibility triangle, those variations have been recommended approval. So those are the recommendations as will be advanced to the village board.
Thank you.
Yes, and in addition, for those matters that were recommended denial by this board, the village board has to approve those measures by a 2/3 majority of the quorum at the meeting. So,
Okay.
so the audience
Thank you
knows.
for that
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
We need a motion to adjourn.
Not adjourned yet.
Oh, we're not?
We're
not done.
I just real quick, we're still in session. That's okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, my
Mr. Chairman, she needs a 1-minute break to go take a picture of something that was
Okay.
presented,
So
and then
we're gonna
she'll finish.
take a 5-minute break, and we'll reconvene to close.
Sounds fair.
Yeah, we're not adjourned.
I'm gonna give them just a couple minutes. We're taking like a 3-minute recess while they clear out, so. All right. Flip over my agenda here. So we are looking at any staff comment, I guess. I think, Ellen, you had something you wanted to catch us up on?
Yeah, our next meeting will be July 14th. It's a regularly scheduled meeting. I have 2 special use cases we've published for. They're both special use for paint booth, auto body and paint booth. I am working on the text amendment and hope to have that as well on the agenda for you. The consideration of accessory structures.
Okay. Anybody have any comments on the commission? Other than, I know this last 2 meetings were long, but I really am glad when people turn out. Everybody doesn't always agree, but generally speaking, it went pretty well. All right, any other comments? Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Thank you, Lynn.